Weather systems continue to move along from west to east. No major storms around, just up and down with temperatures and not a whole lot, if any, rain at all that we have in the forecast for the uh, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England zone. And there's been no rain in my neck of the woods in North Georgia. In fact, there are drought conditions here. So we're going to talk all about that. There are some hints. There are some hints in the long range of some pattern adjustments, let's call that. And we'll talk about that tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by our affiliate, Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and you too can join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned at the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video, and if you decide to make a purchase on the Tempest website, be it the weather station or anything else that they have, and they have just some wonderful gadgets and gizmos, use the coupon code I want a weather station. And if you do, Joe Rayo is going to tell us what they get, Joe.
They're going to get 10% off, Joe. 10% off.
Oh, Johnny Olson would be running and hiding if he knew.
Talk about Johnny Olson. I mean, how about on Jeopardy? The announcer for Jeopardy is 95 years old.
Really?
Amazing. Johnny Gilbert.
Wow. Every time I hear somebody that I know that's in the acting world or in the television world, when I hear their age, I think, oh my God. But somebody recently had a birthday and turned like 97 or 98. And I can't remember now who it was, but I remember June Lockhart, had her birthday. But some of these people that we grew up with, watching them on television shows, and you find out how old they are now, it's like, oh my, that means I'm catching up.
Well, every time I look at myself in the mirror in the morning, I say to myself, "Are you really?" I'm not even going to say how old I am, but I can't even believe I'm that old. Jeez.
Yes. It was a little Phyllis Diller joke. She said, a peeping Tom looked in my window the other day and pulled down the shade. Well, welcome to everybody tonight on the watching the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Welcome to those of you who are on the chat board and those of you who are lurking in the background, and I know who you are. One of them, I think, happens to be my brother, who discovered today in a conversation I had with him a few minutes ago that I had a YouTube channel. Well, it's only been like 6 years.
Oh my God.
Right. So he's
David Schwartz, why is Johnny Gilbert still working at 95? Maybe it's because Johnny Gilbert enjoys doing what he's doing and also getting a nice big fat paycheck every couple of weeks.
Yeah, plus his SAG-AFTRA pension. I don't know what is doing this with this camera. Why all of a sudden this started happening. I know it's sort of adjusting the focus, I guess. Let me see if I move the computer into where the light's a little better. Maybe it won't do that. Because the folks on the chat board were noticing that last night when it was doing it a couple of times. So hopefully it will not do it now. Anyway, for those of you who are new to the channel, subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the notification button and turn it on, because then you won't miss the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is on Sunday through Thursdays at 7:35 p.m. And while we're off on Fridays and Saturdays, if there's a storm around, we'll let you know, because we sometimes do extra shows. So I saw this morning there was a little stick of rain across northern New Jersey and Long Island. It was very narrow. The clouds were a little bit stubborn, but it finally did break out during the afternoon, and you had a nice warm day. And now we've got now we're riding a bit of a roller coaster, because we're going down tonight and down tomorrow, and then up a little bit, up some on Thursday, depending on where you are, because Thursday's going to be one of those days where somebody's not going to have a tough time getting above 50, and somebody else is going to have a easy time getting above 70. And then I thought, it looks like it's probably going to get a bit on the chilly side for Friday and starting on Friday and probably carrying into the first part of next week.
I believe so. I think it will be turning rather chilly, rather cool. But I think that also by mid and late week next week, we're going to be getting into a moderating trend as a ridge builds over the central and eastern states. So this cool down, rather abrupt because, again, we enjoyed spring-like temperatures today, but this cool down will not last too long. It will last for several days. In fact, not even a cool down. It's going to. We'll see some spots tonight drop down into the 30s. Locally here, may get down to about 35 or 36. But then tomorrow will be much cooler than it was today. And then we'll bounce back up into the 50s again, well into the 50s when we get to Thursday.
Up by you in the 50s. Yes, because down in South Jersey, because we have folks in New Jersey that watch, in Eastern Pennsylvania that watch, north to south. In South Jersey, it's probably going to make it above 70 and maybe even into parts of Southeast PA because this warm front's just going to get hung up somewhere.
Yeah, well, that's how. Can we say cold air damming? No, a little early for that. Right?
Yeah, just a bit. I did see though, just sort of in general. I mean, we're in this kind of benign pattern, and it doesn't look like, the rainfall over the next week or so, or even longer, is probably going to be minuscule. However, I do see some things happening around Thanksgiving week that, some changes. Maybe a bit more of an active storm track, but there's some stuff going on. I think in the Pacific Northwest and in the out over into the Aleutians that lead me to suspect that there's going to be some colder air spreading across Canada and maybe across the northern states in the U.S. So that's something I think that might be something to pay attention to when we get there. And by the way, today, 11 years ago today, Joe, was the post-Sandy snowstorm.
Yes.
That hit much of the area of eastern PA, New Jersey, Long Island, Nassau County, more so than Suffolk. There was some places in Nassau County got up to 10, near the Suffolk and Nassau line, that got up over 10 inches. In fact, they had to close the schools for an extra week that out of that system not because of the fact that they of the actual snow accumulation amounts, but the fact was that they didn't have any equipment to clear it because all the equipment that was around was being used to, for the Sandy damage, which was
Right.
which was extensive. So that was. I just remember. I just remember after that snow fell. People were sort of, had their hair was on fire because they were worried about, well, what's going to happen in next. And I suggested that, well, there's always locusts. That's about the only thing left that didn't happen.
This snowstorm that happened in 2012, shortly after Sandy, actually surpassed the all-time snow record at Central Park, which was set in 1989 on November 22nd, 23rd. And we all remember that. That was the snow that fell the night before Thanksgiving in 1989.
Right.
Thankfully, it ended by Thanksgiving morning. But that jumped about 4 inches in New York. And the one that happened again in 2012, 11 years ago, was a little bit above that, something like 4.3 inches. But, it just goes to show you, Joe, that it can happen this early in the season.
In that 89 storm system, the day before, into Thanksgiving morning, it actually snowed on Long Island where I was into early afternoon on Thursday. I wound up with 8 inches. And then the next morning, that Friday morning, the low was 11 above zero. And as it turned out, that was not only that wound up being the heaviest snowfall of the entire winter, and that low of 11 was also the lowest temperature that occurred over the winter months.
And if I remember correctly, somebody filled in for you there early that I had to go in that frigid cold weather early
That Friday morning?
that Black Friday morning.
Yeah,
Let me
I
see.
I always worked Thanksgiving Day. I always worked Thanksgiving morning and always took the Friday.
Let me just see.
Who was that? Who was that
Correct.
sad creature that had to work for me?
Uh, I do remember he was working that morning
Was it Sir
with
Cedric Har?
Roma
Was it Sir
with Roma
Cedric Hardwick?
Torrey. Roma Torrey was working
Yeah.
at the anchor desk that morning.
Was it Sir Cedric Hardwick?
No, I do believe it's somebody named Joe Rayo who was
Yeah.
working that morning for
That
Joe Cioffi.
yeah, that old fossil.
Yes.
Who's sitting next to this old fossil?
And I also remember that on Thanksgiving morning, uh, Bernard and I were heading to work. We were working for a private forecasting service in Queens, and we lived in Levittown at the time. And we ended up with I remember the car spinning out in the snow on that part of the we were going from the Wantagh Parkway onto the Northern State, and there's like a big sweeping curve, and I hit the curve, and I didn't hit it quite right, and the car, I was driving a Malibu station wagon at the time, actually did like a semicircle. I mean, it was not fun trying to travel that Thanksgiving morning in 1989.
Well, I actually have. One of the things with this whole thing that happened with the on this date with regards to that post Sandy system, and I have the surface map up. I'm going to put it up on the screen here so everybody can take a look at it. I mean, it was a really interesting setup, but the whole upper features, the upper feature was traced back to the upper features that were around the week before when Sandy was in the east, and it took almost a full 8 or 9 days for that upper low to clear out, and this was the final outcome of that upper air system, was to form this surface low that you see now. This was at Wednesday morning, 2 a.m., 1 a.m. Wednesday morning on the 12th. And of course now the map disappeared. There it is. But you see it here. You had a low that was sitting east of Virginia, south of Long Island. But what was interesting, with in terms of the setup, if you look at the temperatures that everybody was close to freezing. South Jersey was near 40. New York City temperatures were around 32. But you went up north to the Hudson Valley, you had numbers in the teens and even some single digits, which for this time of year is pretty remarkable. Nice high up in Maine. All talk about cold air damming. It was all nicely wedged in, and just following it along, the low just sort of tracked, slowly northeastward, and did its thing. And Mount Holly put some. No, I'm sorry, Mark Franz, who sometimes watches the show live. I don't see him on the chat board, but he posted some maps from that day on Facebook with the winter storm warnings that went up for much of New Jersey for a 4 to 8 inch snowfall. So there it is. And actually, the low center wound up just about to 40 and 70. It was down to a 984 low, Joe. I mean, that's how strong it was.
I'm just seeing here on the chat board, somebody wants to know why we didn't get Izzy D, the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Joe Rayo, just wondering why you don't get a gym memberships. There are cheaper gyms and help you. And you say some days you do nothing. You can go then.
Well, Joe's being metaphoric when he says that he does nothing. Am I right?
Yeah, that's true. But we actually had a chance to join a gym with FIOS, right? There was a gym on the other side of the building.
Yeah.
That was part of our quote benefits package at FIOS One.
Right. Well, he had to pay for that gym.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it was a discount.
Yeah, exactly. So, and who have to go to work in a suit, then take the suit off, work out at the gym, take a shower, put the suit back on. I wasn't going to do that. Oh, good Lord. But the chairman, Scott Briller, hitting super chat tonight. Thank you, Scott. He says there have been 19 winters in Central Park history that have had at least 50 inches of snow, and 10 of those Novembers had no snow. So that's good. That's good to know. November's not really. You can't really look at what goes on in November in terms of the setups and in terms of um, the pattern and say that okay, it snows in November, therefore the winter's going to be snowy and cold, or the other way around, where it snowed in November, which means that the winter is not going to be snowy and cold. So they had a pattern set up. There's too much chaos in the atmosphere. Patterns set up whenever they set up, and they break down whenever they break down. That's sort of the best way to look at it. So, sometimes it happens. Sometimes you get a combination that works, and sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah. So it doesn't necessarily mean if you get a big snowfall in November that you're going to have a snowy winter. And sometimes, Joe, it actually goes against you. I think, for example, that winter of 89-90, where we had the snowstorm on Thanksgiving, just before Thanksgiving. I think that was the year. Yeah, December was frigidly cold, and then all of a sudden, as soon as we went to New Year's Eve that year, everything flipped, and as soon as we moved into 1990, it turned out to be unusually mild for the rest of the winter season.
And then on the other hand, in 1995, November of 95, at the end of the month, we had like a 2 to 4 inch snowfall that occurred. And as a result, we know how the winter of 95, 96 was. So, you could do a lot with statistics if you want. You can take data and make it work for you. If you just play around with the numbers. Yeah, it can be done.
Well, anyway, let's check out. We've got guys have become mostly clear here, and it looks like we're on our way toward a nice, bright, sunny, albeit much chillier day for our Wednesday, at least here in the tri-state area.
Yep. Meanwhile, it was another gorgeous rain-free day here in North Georgia, where there's a drought going on in the northern part of the state, especially in the northwestern part. Joe's going to pull up the drought maps in a little while, and we'll see what they look like. But in the meantime, you can see the weather across the country, at least the southern half, is pretty quiet. I've got these systems that are moving right along and just south of the Canadian border from west to east. And this is the driver for the next week or beyond that, and where the systems are cut off from moisture in the Gulf of Mexico, cut off from moisture in the Atlantic. So they really don't produce very much. And when this next system that you see moving now out of the northern plains and into the western Great Lakes, when that arrives Wednesday night and Thursday, there's probably not going to be much in the way of rain from this. You go further north. If you go in upstate New York and you go into Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, there'll be more precip. And in fact, there'll be some sleet and snow probably in those areas. It might even start off with some sleet or a little wet snow as far south as the Catskills. But as far as accumulating snows go, it looks like at most there'll be a coating to an inch, even up in those northern areas.
And it doesn't really look, you're right, John, it doesn't really look like what we're going to be looking at for tomorrow night and into Thursday is going to amount to very much. I mean, I didn't even have a chance to look carefully at the some of the short-term models, but
under a tenth.
Yeah,
and maybe even under. Maybe it'd only be a couple of hundredths.
I'm curious. I'm just checking here. I'm looking at Les Plumes and seeing what they call for at least my area. We'll let you know in just a matter of seconds here. Come on up here. I'll check White Plains first. And White Plains, the amount of precip that is being called for is, well, actually, was it? 0.12. 0.12 at White Plains.
Whoopee.
Excuse me?
I said whoopee. Might be enough to fill a dentist's Dixie cup.
Poughkeepsie, 0.19. And if we look at New York, that New York on the plumes is actually represented by LaGuardia. And at LaGuardia, they are predicting or projecting 0.08. So no big deal. There's one model. Which one is this? The MBN2 is predicting at LaGuardia maybe as much as a half an inch, but
Yeah,
that's like that's the outlier.
that model is actually it's a blend of all the models put together, and that sort of gives you a smooth average look of what all the models are doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, which for me, I don't have much use for that personally.
No.
If you use something that gives you averages, you're going to get you're going to achieve average results. And
Yes.
I'm not happy with average results. Got a few showers in southeast New England, back into southeast Connecticut. There's like a little line there that
Right.
is moving through. We've got some patchy showers in eastern Maine, in down east Maine, and also a few showers up north of I-90 in upstate New York. I don't know if there's any snowflakes in that. Meanwhile, you see what's going on back in Wisconsin and into Minnesota as this next low moves along. And we've got a little bit of scattered precip up in the northern and central Rockies. Some of this is in the form of snow, especially in some of the higher elevations. WPC on the snowfall forecast probabilities for 2 inches or more over the next 72 hours. Excuse me, over the next 72 hours. You see in central Colorado, west of Denver, there's some probability there. And also up in northern Idaho and also in the mountains in Washington State and the Cascades. We also have, with this system kind of clipping northern Minnesota with some higher probabilities for at least 2. And you see up in northern Maine, probably with that next system that is coming, where they have a 50% probability of at least 2, with some higher higher probabilities of at least 2 in the western parts of New Brunswick, and then going back on the Canada side. The one thing with this pattern that we're in, Joe, the storms that are tracking this way, it is building the snow cover across North America, but particularly, I mean, specifically in Canada. And over the next over the next couple of weeks, the snow cover across Canada looks to increase considerably. So that's always that's a factor in the winter. It's not the factor, but it is a factor. But there is that going on right now, while the weather in much of the U.S. continues to remain on the quiet side.
I'm glad some of you out there are concerned about my well-being regarding snow. Latex Streams asks, can Joe Rayo use this snowblower and record some removal? I don't understand exactly what that means, but
he wants you to. I'm guessing he wants you to take a video of you removing snow with your snowblower.
well, I took a picture of me with the one major storm that we had last year. It was on the 15th of March, or the 14th of March. We had about 11 inches, and that was elevation snow, actually.
Right.
I'm at 500 feet, and the folks who live further down the road at a much lower elevation didn't get anywhere near what I got. So I can imagine, Joe, how much I would have gotten if I were up your way, like 2,200 feet. But, there are no places in Putnam County that are 2,200 feet above sea levels.
Yeah, well, elevation here makes a huge difference. I've seen it raining down in town, snowing up here, snowing like a blizzard up at Brasstown, which is another almost another 3,000 feet up from where I am. WPC's rainfall forecast for the next 7 days is, not overly inspiring, with rainfall amounts of under 1/10 of an inch, and in some cases they've got an area of white there in northeast Pennsylvania and northwest New Jersey where it won't rain for the next 7 days. So fairly dry. Some patchy heavier amounts in upstate New York. You got an area of 1/2 to 3/4 because that's where this next system is going to be tracking across. We do have ample rainfall going on in the Texas coastal bend with several inches or more forecast over the next 7 days. Some of that does nose into parts of the southeast, but we're talking about maybe some half-inch amounts to me in North Georgia here and into parts of western South Carolina, quarter of an inch into North Carolina, but that's not going to really do very much considering how dry it is. And also 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a half pushing up into Arkansas and western Tennessee. We've got some heavy rains in northwest Washington northward to Vancouver Island, westernmost British Columbia. Inch and a half amount straddling the coastline down almost, but not quite to San Francisco. The 3/4 inch line goes to San Francisco, the half-inch line a bit further south, and looks like the tenth of an inch line gets down to Los Angeles. You got those drought maps?
I can bring it up whenever you like.
Well, go help yourself. Go ahead.
Okay.
It's all yours.
All right. Well, you give me some time here. I went on Google to go to climate predictions and I typed in CPC, and the first thing that came up was the CPC exam certification frequently asked questions for medical billing. So I don't know why that, sometimes weird things come up when you least expected. All right, so we will bring up first the drought situation, the U.S. Drought Monitor. Come on, bring it up. There you go. Yeah, you could see that what Joe was talking about. In fact, let me do a close-up here, and you could see that down here across much of Louisiana and on into a portion of Mississippi, we have exceptional drought being indicated. And that just diminishes slightly to only extreme drought over northern Mississippi and into the lower half of Tennessee. But yeah, you could see that these folks down here certainly could use a little bit of moisture, which will apparently be coming. We just saw the map showing a broad area of significant rainfall down here in the Gulf of Mexico. So all we would have to hope for is that to move a bit northward and bring some much needed rainfall down here. You can see up in our neck of the woods here in the New York area and much of the Northeast, there really isn't all that much to write home about. All right, so it's abnormally dry over a part of southern New Jersey, southeastern Pennsylvania, northwestern Pennsylvania, and into a part of western New York. But most of the rest of New York and all of New England is underneath nothing. So we're in pretty good shape in terms of moisture, or in terms of not having a drought up here in the Northeast. Elsewhere,
excuse me, sorry about that.
Up your way, Joe, in your part of Georgia. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Let's go here. And yeah, you could tell. I mean, we're close to where you are. They're indicating that extreme drought is in place.
Yes.
Specifically, they have you in a severe drought, not extreme, but severe drought.
Right.
And I guess that's the result of having what? How much rain since September?
I would say probably under a half inch. Maybe a little bit more than that, but not much more.
Interestingly, down to the south of you, over in central and southern Georgia, a good part of the state down there is underneath no drought.
Well, once you get south, when you go south of Atlanta, because Atlanta is 800 feet above sea level. Okay, so it's a gradual rise in elevation. But once you start going south of Atlanta, once you get halfway down the state and south, it's flat. I mean, it's like Florida. It's just absolutely flat. So they get a lot of the big thunderstorms that set up in the summertime, in particular, set up from Atlanta, I-85. That's the magic line. I-85 south, and I'm north of I-85. And northeast of I-75. So yeah, that's where they've gotten a lot of rain this summer, but a lot of that has not made it all the up to the northern part of the state.
And let's see, they have in this area here in the brown, which includes your area all the way down into the central Gulf Coast, drought persisting. This light area here is indicating drought remains but improves, and even drought removal likely in the darker shade here. There is some improvement in places like over in Texas and up to Arkansas and southern sections of Oklahoma. But again, down here, they are saying that the drought is going to persist for a little while longer.
By the
Rest
way,
of the north, yeah.
no, I was going to say Hawaii. I mean, I can kind of only see it pretty small on the screen, but Hawaii, what are they under?
They are saying that the drought persists in Hawaii too. Well, let's go back to the other map, the drought monitor. And do they have Hawaii? Yes, they do have Hawaii. Let me see here. So in Hawaii, what they are looking at is basically anything from moderate drought to extreme drought. There's a little bit of extreme drought right here in on the Big Island, and also on, I think this is Maui. But yeah, they all of the Hawaiian Islands have had their fair share of dry conditions, and again, anything from moderate to severe to even extreme drought being recorded in just about all of the islands of Hawaii. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Can I? Yeah, there you go. You can see for yourself. There's not a single area on the Hawaiian Island chain that's in white. Everything at the very least is yellow or abnormally dry. And again, what we have here on the Big Island, also in Maui, is extreme drought. So they still are suffering from the same conditions that they had way back during the summertime, which helped to set the stage for all of that terrible fire activity on Maui. And so what they could use a nice Pacific storm, or what they call a Kona storm, which they tend to see a few times during the winter, but they apparently have not had one yet.
Yeah. All right, let me alleviate Tom Contino's concerns about my perennials. We've had multiple freezes here. I've been down to 32 just about every morning for days and days and days now. So my plants are, all the leaves are down. Plants are all in their dormant stage, so I really don't have to worry about them. They'll hold on. Actually, we have one upside here is that it's clay soil, and when it does rain, that soil absorbs that moisture and holds onto it for a long time. So it's not like it was a sandy soil where everything just drains. So the ground is dry, and it's kind of hard, but underneath it's it's still, there's still plenty of moisture. So I don't think I have any worries as far as my plants are concerned. But I appreciate the fact that Tom is worried about my garden,
Yes.
which is out there blowing. I've got leaves, Joe. They're like 3 feet deep. I mean, they are just there's so many leaves uh, that my leaf blower can't keep up with them. All right, so
I have a big oak tree that is dropping leaves left. Still a considerable amount of leaves on that tree, but also a considerable amount underneath the tree. And I'm talking about leaves, Joe, that are pretty large. I would say in some cases maybe as large as 4 or 5 inches wide. And again, they're all over, but just the middle part of the yard, the front end and the back end, not all that much, but right in the middle, underneath that tree, it's filled with leaves. And I can see where I'm going to be doing a lot of mulching later this week or this weekend. So
the fire, Chuck Cardillo, I think the one that I saw that was in Andrews, North Carolina, they got that under there. That's all taken care of. But there's some wildfires going on now in Northwest Georgia, where where the drought is extreme. So I didn't see much on it today, but I did happen to switch around to the local newscast when the weather was on, and they were talking about it. And then I quickly switched off of it because I just can't, I can't watch for too long without, wanting to go watch Forensic Files on HLN. All right, so teleconnections are not really doing very much. We showed this yesterday with the NAO. It's kind of a little bit negative, and then it goes a little bit barely positive after the 15th, but barely positive. And we look at the other ones. which I'm going to do now. We'll look at the PNA. The PNA also just straddling the neutral line, and the Arctic oscillation. We'll look at that. Uh, the Arctic oscillation goes about one standard deviation positive, which is nothing, not really crazy, but it does go one standard deviation positive around mid-month, and then sort of sits there. But the AO is kind of funny because sometimes when it's negative, it usually means cold in the east. But on the other hand, you can look at the winter of 2013 and 14. I think it was 2013 and 14. If it wasn't that one, it was 14, 15, where the AO was two standard deviations positive, and everybody was wondering, well, how is it that we're this cold with the AO doing what it's doing? So, sometimes the teleconnections connect in such a way that you wind up with strange outcomes, and that was the case with that. So I just want to kind of just real quick, we're just going to run through the ensembles and in the long range, which I thought were kind of interesting. Of course, as you go deeper out in time, they become broader. But you can see the troughing that's in the east for the rest of this week and into this weekend. And then we go into, there's another trough that's going to drop down over the weekend to the mid-Atlantic states. So that's why you see all that blue there. But you can also see the ridge that's popping up in the center of the country in a deep trough off the west coast. Well, that ridge is going to move into the east because the eastern trough is going to pull out. This is for the middle and latter part of next week. But it doesn't go crazy. It's just kind of on the flattish side. But over time, that ridge weakens. And in fact, we go to, where the heights are just basically near normal and even a little bit below normal, not that far away. And I'm sort of interested in the fact that this area here, Joe, in the long range, this area up here is your negative East Pacific oscillation. Okay, and uh, I have said many times that is the one everybody focuses too much on the NAO. The EPO is the one you really should focus on because when that goes negative, that usually favors cold air spreading across Canada and eventually across the at least the northern half of the U.S. Particularly if the EPO starts to push its way into Western Canada, it forces colder air into Eastern Canada and the Great Lakes and the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states, the Ohio Valley. So the ensembles going in this direction, I think, is something worth paying attention to. And this would be during, happening sometime during Thanksgiving week. So I don't know if that, what that means in terms of timing of any kind of, colder pattern developing. And of course, we could look at this tomorrow and it might be totally different. The EPS, which is the European version, is actually even more bullish, which was surprising. But I'll just run through this. I mean, they're the same with the GFS. You get that ridge next week after the cold air pulls out from Monday and Tuesday, and then gradually it's got a fairly well-defined trough on the EPS, which is unusual. Moving into the middle of the country, and the ridge starts to disappear, and then toward the end of the forecast period, you've got a rather strong East Pacific, negative EPO signal here. Minus E P.
Well, there seems to be when I was looking at the. Yes.
No, go on. I'm sorry.
What I was saying is that it appears that on some of the long-range models that before Thanksgiving arrives, let's say the Monday or Tuesday before Thanksgiving, there will be a fairly significant weather system, a front that will be moving into the eastern part of the country and bringing significant wind and rain to much of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic area. Thankfully, that will not coincide apparently with Thanksgiving or Getaway Wednesday, which is a very heavily traveled day, the day before Thanksgiving. But Monday and Monday and Tuesday before Thanksgiving, that on the calendar is what? That's the 20th and 21st of November. That'll be a time to watch because that system will be probably the most significant weather system in terms of precipitation, in terms of wind that we're going to see so far this month. And behind it comes a surge of noticeably cooler air, it would appear, Joe, for in time for Getaway Wednesday and for Thanksgiving.
Well, look, if what I just showed you is correct, yeah, I would agree with you that certainly we would see something, maybe get out of this dryish pattern during Thanksgiving week. The other thing, again, I will caution everybody, is the fact that the GFS, and it stands alone, keeps making tropical storms and hurricanes in the Caribbean in the long range, and we've yet to see them pop up. The funny thing about the GFS is early in the season it was firing up renegade systems. That didn't happen.
Right.
It was
Right.
very good during during the important part of the hurricane season. And now that we're at the end of it, it seems to have gone back to the idea where it still wants to make tropical storms and hurricanes. And until I see some sort of confirmation from either the ensembles or the European with regards to anything developing down there, and it's going to impact what the models are doing across the United States and across North America. If it shows a hurricane in the Caribbean moving northeastward out into the Bahamas, that's going to affect ridges and troughs across the U.S. If that's not there, you'll have a totally different outcome. But again, this little chilly shot tomorrow. Warm front tomorrow night, cold front on Thursday, not much with it. We've got some rain spreading across Texas into Arkansas that falls apart by the time it gets to me. But then it does show maybe some rain coming in Friday night and Saturday. Meanwhile, in the Northeast, with the cold front that moves through late Thursday, there's a fairly, it's not a half bad shot of cold air that's coming down for Friday and Saturday, and it gets reinforced by a low that forms off the southeast coast on Sunday and moves out to the south. And yeah, that's a little bit of snow in eastern West Virginia and northwestern Virginia in the land of Johnny Quest that the model is showing on this run. And it stays cold into Tuesday, and then it starts to moderate after that. I don't know that this is going to be one of those moderations that winds up, shooting temperatures up off the wall. I want to be a little careful because it could turn out to be. But then again, look, here's the hurricane again. You can sort of see it there on the bottom of the screen over Cuba.
Right.
It's got a Cat 2 hurricane there. This is on day 11. And as I've said, this has been going on now for the better part of the last 10 or 11 days, where the GFS has been doing this, and nothing's there. Meanwhile, pattern stays fairly benign through not only this weekend but next weekend. And then here's that system that Joe was talking about on the long range. It was there this morning. It's there this afternoon. It's there on this run, bringing rain and wind along about Tuesday, Wednesday of Thanksgiving week, and then there's some colder air behind it. But going back to that negative East Pacific oscillation, if we take a look at the extent of how this high is oriented, I mean, this is what happens when that EPO goes negative. You've got your cold air starts to spread out from Western Canada across South Central Canada and eventually into Eastern Canada, just sort of pushes its way down into the Great Lakes and Northeast. So that's something I think we should start paying attention to in the long range in the coming days to see, if this is going to, if this is real, because it might not be. Let's see it get a little bit closer to the short range, but we're not going to stay dry, and we're not going to stay dry forever. That's for sure.
Well, first of all, let me address Izzy D, who says, I guess he's talking about my commenting about that Monday, Tuesday before Thanksgiving thing. Well, remember, you said the same thing about the 9th and the 11th of this month. I don't believe it until the whole pattern changed. What you forget to note, Izzy, is that with the 9th through to the 11th, and that was the one that supposedly was going to give us a tremendous snowstorm here in the Northeast. We were looking at the numbers like 15 and 20 inches or whatever. And part of the problem with that, and we said it was a problem, is that if they were taking one of those GFS hurricanes, bringing the moisture, bringing the whole storm up, and merging with colder air to produce that tremendous area of snow. And we both were like laughing. We were chuckling. We said, there's no way in the world that's going to happen. and we didn't put much stock in it. And as you could see, it's a good thing we didn't, because it ain't going to happen. Now, as far as what I noticed, Joe, is that when I looked at the 12Z run of the GFS, they had that system coming through Monday, Tuesday. What I just saw on the 18Z that you put up on the screen was more of a Wednesday, Thursday type of event.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to work timing out 15 days out, but
yeah.
it's likely that if there's going to be if you're going to get a change in the whole upper air profile, but particularly a change across the on the Pacific side, the Northwest Pacific, the Northwest part of Canada, and into the Gulf of Alaska, north to Alaska. If that's going to all go to higher than normal pressures in that negative EPO signal, I can't imagine it happening. I can't imagine that would happen without some kind of storm development someplace.
Yeah, I can't. Well, we know something is going to happen the first half of that week.
Right.
And timing it out this far in advance is an exercise in futility. Let's put it that way.
Correct. Floodweather said, I read posts from other meteorologists that said that the GFS is having a broken bias developing phantom tropical activity in the Caribbean. So basically, those phantoms should be ignored. I totally agree. I mean, the first thing I do when I see the GFS does stuff like this is I go right to the European North Atlantic view to see if the European's doing the same thing. And if it's not, then I know it's not happening. But unfortunately, if the model keeps generating those storms, it is going to impact the ridges to the north of it, the troughs to the northeast of it. They're all going to be interacting in a different sort of way if there's no tropical system there. So you have to try to figure out, okay, well, if I take the storm out, what is that interaction going to be? And that's not an easy thing to do, because then you got all these systems that are upstream that might play into it. But yeah, the bottom line is we have to ignore it, and then we also have to kind of look at everything with a grain of salt with regards to, more so than usual, with regards to the long range, because of that factor. So hopefully it stops doing it. But the European didn't do it, and the European didn't have it, and the European does show on the ensembles anyway that change in the flow pattern across Western Canada and out into the Gulf of Alaska, which I think is going to be real. That's really important in terms of how the weather for the Northeast and for the Mid-Atlantic states, and Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, et cetera, in the longer term. So we'll see how that plays out in the coming days. We'll see how these models handle all of this. Do you have
a friend of mine just sent me a map which I wanted to share with everybody on the screen here. Can you see that, Joe? Is that a
Yeah, I see it.
Honest winter forecast? And in this area, the tri-state area, it says many well forecasted surprise snows with too much media coverage. And then look at this, DC. It's pointing to Washington DC and says snow hole.
Right. Well, there's always a snow hole someplace. By the way, I did fail to mention this the last couple of nights, and now I remembered what I wanted to say. Have you seen any of these long-range forecasts that have been coming out? Have you seen anybody put up a forecast that isn't calling for a snowy winter in the eastern part of the United States?
No, I haven't.
And that fact bothers me. Okay. The fact that all of these people, everybody, and I'm not faulting their forecasts. I mean, I know that some of them, it's just reflexive. Every year, it's the same crap. So that's fine. But, there are, the reputable people that I know and respect are all kind of in the same boat. And I don't often feel very comfortable when everybody's on one side of a trade. It's usually a pretty good indication to you for you to look at the other side of this, okay? And the other side of it would be that the El Nino becomes so strong and so off the wall that it overwhelms any other factors that might play out in the winter months. So Bill Goodman sent me some stuff today, and there's some of the things that that he was looking at. Some of them were suggesting that this would be a winter feast in the east, and then there were others that were giving indications that, well, it could be a feast, but it could also be a famine. You know, but I get more and more uncomfortable with the more people that are on the same side of the pool of the ship, so to speak. Uh, it's time to maybe, I don't know, might want to think about rearranging the deck chairs. Because I don't like it when everybody's in one side, on the same side. But we'll see. Um, you have Briller Jeopardy, right?
Yes, I do.
All right,
And
let's get that done.
I don't think the this is in order of. Well, I don't think this is in order. I think this is just random, but on the list here. But according to NOAA, what 10 states average the most snow annually?
What 10 states average the most snow annually?
Right. There are 10 states. Which are the 10, or what are the 10 that average more snow than, I guess, anybody else?
All
So
right.
any
Well, we'll let the folks on the chat board participate here. Um, well, Fled Weather starts it off with Maine.
Maine is on the list.
Keith Smolin says Alaska and Maine.
Alaska is on the list.
Fled Weather says Colorado.
Colorado is on the list.
John Melander says Michigan.
Michigan is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 4 left.
All right. Well, let's try. The Northern Grace puts out. I'm thinking probably not on the list. North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota.
North Dakota is not on the list. South Dakota is not on the list. But Minnesota is on the list.
All right. So now how many we have left?
3.
All right. Let's Fled Weather and Keith Smolin have now proposed Wyoming.
And Wyoming is there. Yes.
So now there's 2. Well, if Wyoming is there, you got to think Montana is there.
You would think so, wouldn't
But
you?
it's not.
But it's not.
So there's 2 left.
Right.
All right.
I would give you a hint.
Nobody said New York.
It's too bad because New York is on the list.
All right, so I figured New York is on the list. All right, so now that leaves us with 1, correct?
Right, and I'm going to give you a hint for that last one.
All right.
On their license plate, at least as of a few years ago, it said the greatest snow on Earth.
Oh, well, I'm thinking that's got to be Utah.
And Utah is that, and we got them all.
We got them all. Was
Utah,
Patrick Darcy and Maggie P mentioned California? Was California on there? I would tend to think not.
No, California was not on the list.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Because the climate in California it's such a big state from north to south that and last year was just an absolute freak of nature what happened there anyway.
With the Sierra Nevadas and everything.
Exactly.
Anybody know a good remedy for a pinched nerve?
No. Chiropractor maybe?
I don't want to. I've been for the last week. I've had this. It's either a pinched nerve or a pulled muscle in the top of my back, and I've been taking Advil. I've been chucking Advil down like M&Ms. So I'm going to need to do that.
I'm sorry to hear this. Christinapedia would ask if you would read off the states on that list.
Vermont.
Wait, hold on. Before you do, I want you to channel Bob Barker calling out the parade of states on the Miss USA pageant. Our first semifinalist is.
Who was the co-host with Bob Barker during those years?
June Lockhart for a number of years, and then it was Helen O'Connell.
Helen O'Connell. There you go. That's who I remember. Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire, Alaska, Colorado, Michigan, New York, Utah, Utah, Wyoming, and Minnesota.
All right, very good. Okay, so that wraps it up for tonight. The Joe and Joe Weather Show brought to you by our affiliate Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and you too can join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. Use the coupon code I want a weather station for anything you purchase from the Tempest website. And if you do buy something, you get
You get 10% off. Tom Contino, he says, I pray it's not a disc. Disc issues in your upper back can be quite difficult to treat. Tom, I've never once put a CD or a DVD on my upper back.
Why did I know you were going to go down that particular road?
Yeah,
Why
whatever.
did I know that?
Yes.
Oh, good Lord. All right, folks. So look, tomorrow night we will have a show at 7:35, but it's going to be a short show tomorrow night because Joe's got something to do. So it'll be a half an hour and then we're done. All right. So, but we will be here tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time.
And I have a feeling that it's going to be about as exciting and as interesting as it was tonight, except we were able to stretch it out to just under an hour.
Just about.
Yep.
That's why we're so talented. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here. We'll see you tomorrow. Night, night.
Good night.